Hello, my name's Ian McCall. I thought we'd take a little look today at the superficial basal cell skin cancer. This is a virtual clinical slide courtesy of virtual Dermpath, and we're just going to work our way through it. But before we do, I think we might just have a look at some clinical features of superficial BCC before we start. Let's have a look at this lesion here. This is in the lady's upper back. This is the superficial BCC, the pink area. You can see the small advancing edge here. There's a little bit of scale associated with it, but most superficial BCCs don't have a lot of scale associated with them because the process is in the dermis. There's budding off of basal cells into the dermis itself. There shouldn't be a lot of irritation of the epidermis. Here are a couple of other small ones in this patient. Sometimes the superficial BCC can be pigmented, as in this variant here. There's pigmentation made up of melanin and melanophages in amongst some of the basal cells. This is the advancing edge of the lesion here, and this is it back here as well. There's probably been some regression here. Other examples would be a back like this. Now, this patient has multiple areas of solar damage. I mean, there's a lot of keratin here as well, so he's certainly got quite a bit of solar keratosis. Some of these may be SCC in situ, but a lot of these have been partially treated with freezing before, and you can often see little bits of BCC at an edge. You can see perhaps a small nodular BCC here. This is your more typical BCC. Again, a little bit more scale than usual. Still got your advancing edge of the lesion here. And with a dermatoscope, what you tend to see in BCC are some of these linear serpentine vessels. The white is collagen. The more infiltrating a BCC is, the more collagen you're going to see. With an SCC in situ dermatoscopically, you tend to see globular vessels, and you're not seeing it in this. These are the linear serpentine vessels that are more typical of a superficial BCC. Well, that's enough of the clinical and the dermatoscopy. Let's have a look at the histopathology again. Now, this is the skin. This is normal keratosis, some basket weave hyperkeratosis here. This is your epidermis, and here is your basal cell skin cancer budding off the basal layer. The classic features, they're usually fairly hyperchromatic nuclei, deepish blue nuclei. There's not usually a lot of cytoplasm associated with them, and they typically have this palisading of cells around the periphery of the little lobules of tissue that are forming. If we go a little bit further along here you can see a sort of skip area, and then another area of proliferation. I'm not sure if there's much more towards the end of this or not. Yeah, a rather big sort of apparent skip area, and another area coming off here. Now you can see this lesion's been shaved. This is just extending into the papillary dermis. It's not extending very deep at all. So a lot of these lesions can be shaved and then treated by keratin cautery because they're not going very deep. The other cells that you're seeing here are lymphocytes, and often you'll get a degree of lymphatic irritation, or lymphatic infiltration, I should say, around the base of these as part of the inflammatory reaction to the tumor itself. The other phenomenon you sometimes see is this sort of clefting here at the edges of these little lobules. It's quite a common feature. The stroma surrounding these lesions is different from normal stroma, and there is a degree of interaction between the stroma and the lobules. And the other thing to point out is that though I've said these seem to be coming off from different points, If you actually analyze each of these, you find that it's all one cell type. In other words, there's not a series of different sort of mutations coming here, and really all of these are actually interconnected. If you look at them in a three-dimensional view, they're all one and the same lesion. The problem is, if you do a punch biopsy and say you punch in this area here, then you're not going to get any BCC. And so it's still useful to call these superficial multifocal BCCs. And you've got to watch that you are careful where you do your punch biopsy if you're going to try and pick them up. These lesions generally are the easiest of BCCs, the easiest of the basal cell skin cancers to treat. They don't go deep. They very rarely show any spread along nerves. It's the more infiltrative type that will. If you look at these under high power, let's just go down a little bit. Bear with me till that gets into view. Actually, we could do with just a little bit less than that, in fact. It's either going to be all or none. But sometimes you can, in fact, see mitoses in these. That's better. Let's get it at that level once it comes into focus. You sometimes can see mitoses in these, and you might think, well, if there are mitotic figures, that means it's a fairly rapidly growing proliferative lesion. But there's also a fair bit of what's called apoptosis, or programmed cell death in these. So in spite of the proliferative activity of these, a lot of the cells are in fact dying off as well. And it's one of the features that means that these lesions don't in fact go very deep. They tend to go superficial and they don't spread elsewhere. So, superficial multifocal BCC, they can be treated by a variety of treatments, including cryotherapy, obviously excisional surgery, and treatment with imiquimod as well is quite successful, but that's another issue. That's the histology. Here you see the budding, you see the inflammatory infiltrate, you see the little bit of clefting around some of these. And what we should do later is then go and have a look at the other types of basal cell skin cancer and see how the histology differs. Thank you very much.